You're listening to an archived Cabral Concept podcast. After listening to this show, check out the most up-to-date podcasts available at stephencabral.com/podcasts or search directly on iTunes. And now, welcome to the Cabral Concept, where board-certified naturopath and integrative health practitioner Dr. Stephen Cabral shares how he was diagnosed at the age of 17 with a life-altering illness and given no hope for recovery. It was only after studying and traveling all over the world did he discover how to combine ancient Ayurvedic healing practices with state-of-the-art naturopathic and functional medicine to fully rebalance the body and re-energize it with life. It's time to discover how to get well, lose weight, and finally feel alive again. And now, here's your host, Dr. Stephen Cabral.
On today's Total Wellness Tuesday, I want to share a story about just about 2 weeks ago, actually going out to dinner. I was with my two girls, I was with my wife, and we were just eating at a restaurant. We typically do, just a really casual restaurant type bar in Maine. And we got normal food that we usually do, which was basically like a fish type platter. It was salmon, it was shrimp, there's some other dishes, and then we started with a Mediterranean appetizer, which was hummus and olives and all this great food. And about 2 hours after the meal, my wife started to feel sick to her stomach. And during that night, my daughter, my youngest daughter, she's 2 turning 3 right now, she was actually up the whole night throwing up. So she literally threw up every hour and a half. We had to put her in the tub. We had to, wash her down every time, change the bed. And obviously, if you're a parent, you've probably been through this before. And it's brutal. I mean, you don't get any sleep, but you just feel so bad for your child that they're that sick. And every time she would drink some water, a half hour later, she would just throw up again. And so what I suspected, obviously, was that it was from whatever we ate at dinner. Now, here's the interesting thing. You would say, well, if it was something you ate at dinner, why did only 2 out of the 4 people get sick? And so that's the interesting thing about food poisoning or getting sick to your stomach in general, is that some people are more susceptible than others. It's not always well known, but I can tell you this, that the people that produce more stomach acid are those people that are going to be more protected from the bacteria that might be in the food that isn't well cooked, or the fish or whatever might have just had a certain type of bacteria that had more of an infectional-based cause. Could have been on the plates. The plates weren't well cleaned, or the silverware, anything like that. I mean, there are other things, meaning that the bacteria that I'm about to share with you can actually be contracted through saliva, through vomit, through fecal matter, through any of these things. And I know that that sounds gross to even think about, but you don't always know how the people preparing your food are doing so. You don't know if they're wearing gloves or not wearing gloves. And these things can happen, and not everyone gets sick. And one of those reasons is because some people produce more stomach acid, and that acid will kill the bacteria that's coming into the body. So one of the things that I actually did just prophylactically when I went overseas as a preventative measure, when I was in India, when I was in China, I tried not to eat any meat in general. I'm not saying like you can't when you go to China or India, but what I was saying is that my body was most likely not going to be prepared to eat any of that type of food. Plus, when I was in India, I was on a very strict vegan diet, and so that wasn't even an option. But what I did make sure that was for most meals, I was actually taking betaine HCl, which helped to build up my stomach acid. Now, I don't want to take that every single meal, and even for my private wellness clients, I certainly don't recommend that after about 3 to 4 months, because we've rebuilt their stomach acid. And again, for the most part, 9 out of 10 of the people that I work with never will use betaine HCl. We'll simply use digestive enzymes, like our daily digestive enzyme, or we'll use ginger tea at meals. But, again, you still want to build up your digestive system strong enough. So here's the thing. What if that does happen, though? What if you do get the stomach infection, you do get food poisoning of some type? What do you do? Well, after I saw my youngest daughter, and she's, again, just 2 turning 3, she only weighs about 30 pounds or so. It's scary. It's frightening. She can't hold down food. And so my job was obviously to get her better as fast as humanly possible. And so this is what I'm going to recommend for an adult. And then this is what I did for my own child. You can always decide if it works best for you. And then I'm going to tell you a little bit about this infection that might need to be cleared up in the future as well because of this. So immediately for my daughter, what I did was I knew that she was going to drink anything that I gave her because all she kept asking for was water. But every time I gave her water, she threw it up. Even if I tried to mix in some like fruit with electrolytes in it to try to get some more basically potassium, sodium, all those things in her body, she still threw it up. So I said, I need to get something into her stomach that's going to kill this infection. So what I did was I opened up some charcoal and bentonite capsules. I opened up one capsule, put it in just about 2 inches to 3 inches of water, and then I mixed that with a full dropper of sovereign silver, colloidal silver drops. So essentially, let me break down why I did this and why it worked, and it did work within hours. So the bentonite clay and the charcoal, the activated charcoal, is actually going to grab onto that bacteria. It's actually going to seize it up. It's going to collect it, grab onto it, and then just move it out of your system. Charcoal is one of those things that the Poison Center, National Poison Center, would tell you to use if you ever got poisoning, of any type. And so charcoal is a great thing. Bentonite clay, though, has that ionic, magnetic-based properties that's going to latch on, grab onto, and remove anything, right out of that stomach. So that's what I first did. Mixed that in. I mixed the colloidal silver in as well. And then what I wanted to do from there was to get in somehow some mastic gum. And again, you can pronounce it mastic gum. If you're overseas, it's mastica gum. My goal was, these are things that I know are going to really help to kill that, if it is H. pylori, which I'm going to chat about in a minute, get that out of the stomach and do try to knock it down as quickly as possible. So I also did it in a small amount, 2 to 3 ounces of water or so. And I just had her drink that small amount. And then, of course, she wanted more water. I wanted to see how that settled for about a half hour to an hour. And then I gave her the rest of that mixture. So she went from being really not feeling well at all, very little color in the face, just weak. Again, if my daughter was in grave danger, believe me, we would be at the emergency rooms. And I recommend the same for you. But at this point, there was no diarrhea. There was nothing like that. She threw up a few times. She was having trouble keeping the liquid down. I'm also, a naturopathic doctor. I have over a decade of study, research, degree overseas. If you don't feel comfortable with this, I completely understand. But I want you to know how you can treat these things naturally. I think that's really important that you understand that as well, and to start as quickly as possible. So that's what we did. She was a completely new little girl within about 3 to 4 hours. It was absolutely amazing. And of course, we didn't just get right into eating food and all of that. She continued the supplements through the rest of the day. And then after that, I was just giving her some lactobacillus acidophilus as well, just to get some good bacteria back in that small intestine. That really did seem to help. I gave her a little extra vitamin C that night. I also gave her the Nature-Nex, part of the children's immune protocol. Again, that's why you always want to have these things on hand. I gave her that Nature-Nex syrup, which contains thyme, it contains oregano, and I know all of those things certainly help to kill the infection as well. So she got that, she got her charcoal, she got the colloidal silver, and it worked great. Now, what would I do for an adult? Well, what I would do for an adult is I would use our intestinal cleanse. So it's not our intestinal cleanse. We simply have it at stephencabral.com/store. It's not mine. But what it is it is the same type of protocol. It contains a laxative, which is the IF1. You certainly don't need to use that if you're already having loose stool or diarrhea. You would just use the powder, which is the intestinal formula 2. That contains the charcoal, the bentonite clay, contains all of those things. And then you would use a product called Healthy Belly. I'm going to talk a lot more about mastic gum this Friday, so definitely stay tuned for the Friday review. It's a product a lot of people have been asking to learn more about, like what's this thing, mastic gum? But there's a lot more to it in the Healthy Belly than just that, meaning like there's berberine, there's bismuth, which not a lot of people know about, a certain type of zinc. So I'm really excited to share that with you. But that's what I would do, for an adult who gets food poisoning. I would take that intestinal formula 2. I would make sure you get it right out of your system. I'd probably do a little bit of coconut oil as well. I would definitely do the colloidal silver to help as an antimicrobial to kill that bacteria going forward. Now, let's talk just a little bit about what sometimes this food poisoning can be. Like if it's just some extra bacteria on a food and you can't handle it and you get really sick, okay, maybe then it's just in and out of your system, no problem at all. But H. pylori right now, it's like if you look at all of the humans in the world, it's anywhere from like 25% to 50%. Nobody knows the exact number because so many people are walking around undetected, but they know it's at least a quarter of the population, especially in areas like South America, a lot of like the country, obviously, studying overseas in India, there was just massive amounts of H. pylori as well. Well, why is it? Why is it it's a bacterial infection? Well, it's passed, as I said before, by saliva, vomit, fecal matter. Again, if someone doesn't wash their hands well enough after using the toilet, but also it just passed through food and contaminated water. And contaminated water is one of the number one ways to get H. pylori. Now, if you think about it, like, well, okay, my water's not contaminated. Sure, but like, what if you go out to a salad bar and all that food, all that lettuce has been washed with contaminated water? You can get H. pylori that way. And if your stomach isn't strong enough, that bacteria can really take a foothold. And again, some people are more susceptible than others in getting the actual infection. So what you want to look for is this, meaning that if you think you might have H. pylori, you don't have food poisoning, but you still might have something not quite right with your stomach. If you have aching or burning in your stomach, especially like if you didn't even eat any food or just on contact with food as your body's starting the meal, good sign that you might have H. pylori. It might be that acid that's really feeding that Helicobacter pylori as well. So the abdominal pain, this is a big one too. If your stomach hurts, again, when it's empty, a really big sign. And again, these are straight off the Mayo Clinic. Like this is Mayo Clinic data. And Mayo Clinic, regardless of whether you just don't believe in conventional medicine or not, we have a lot of good research. And the research really does hold strong with a lot of these bacterial infections. If you're often nauseous, if you don't have a good appetite, if you burp, especially when there's no food in your stomach, if you're burping, big sign that you might have H. pylori infection. Bloating, if you're gaining weight, you can't figure out why you're gaining weight. Again, these are all really big signs of an H. pylori infection. Some of the more severe ones that I'll read you off are essentially bloody or black tarry stools, difficulty swallowing, persistent abdominal pain, or bloody or black vomit that almost look like coffee grinds. Now, that's very severe. At that point, you're going to want to go right to your PCP or MD and just make sure we get this Helicobacter pylori right out of the system. And again, it might be, there's many different treatments. I'm going to give you a natural-based treatment for that right now. So, if you let these things go, this type of infection, it can become, you can get an ulcer in the bottom part of your stomach, the gastric part of your stomach. You can get an ulcer there. If you've ever been told that you have a gastric ulcer or you have a duodenal ulcer, which is the first part of the small intestine, very good sign that you might have an H. pylori-based infection as well. So there's a couple things you can do. You can get a blood test, which isn't great, not very accurate. You could do a breath test, where, a breath test works pretty well. You're essentially swallowing a pill or drinking some liquid that has what's called tagged carbon molecules. And then you're going to breathe out, you're going to actually see if there's H. pylori going on right now. Now, that's pretty good. It's not great, though, because there's a lot of false negatives, which means that some people still have H. pylori, but it's not active enough to actually test positive on that specific breath test. My favorite way is a stool test. We use this all the time in my practice. You can get it online as well. You can just go to stevencabral.com/store, and you just click on the wellness, and I believe it's right under there, that stool test. And again, that tests for parasites. It tests for H. pylori. Pretty amazing test and really, really accurate as well. The last thing you can have done is what's called a scope test. You can go to a GI specialist and they'll do what's called an endoscopy. And during the endoscopy, they'll actually put a flex tube down your throat and into your stomach and the first part of your small intestine with a little camera on it. And they will look for any type of tissue that might look like it's malfunctioning, we'll put it that way, that the mucosa layer over the stomach is actually starting to break down, and they could actually take a little biopsy as well. So that's more invasive. Again, the stool test is my preferred option for people to test. But again, let's just say you had a lot of those symptoms, and you just say, you know what, instead of doing all of these tests, why don't I just try to go for the treatment? And of course, a treatment from a conventional medicine standpoint would just be to put you on a PPI or some type of H2 blocker, like a histamine blocker. The problem is that if you use those, all you're treating are the symptoms, meaning like you're stopping acid production, and the acid production is going to essentially wipe out a lot of the H. pylori. It's not going to allow it to proliferate, but that's not really what you want. What you want is to not shut down your own acid production, because if you do that, then you can't digest protein properly and you lead to putrefaction in the intestines of all these proteins. You can then lead to SIBO or lower GI-based issues instead of upper GI issues. So that to me doesn't make sense. And then if they just give you Pepto-Bismol, okay, that's fine because it's a mucosa layer, so you might not get the ulcers. But again, that's not really working on the H. pylori infection. My personal opinion and what I've seen work from a clinical perspective is using things things like berberine, is using oregano oil, is using my favorite, which is mastic gum. Mastic gum's been used by thousands of years. It's been used in South America. It's used in India. It's used in the US. It's used by Native Americans. Again, that's my highest recommendation. You can get it in many different forms. We have what's called the Healthy Belly capsule that contains everything. It even contains the bismuth. So it's going to be the protective layer as well. One of my favorite products, really, it's so hardly anyone knows about this. It's just not that well known. It's certainly well studied, but from a naturopathic perspective, there wasn't a lot of naturopaths I knew who were really chatting about this, talking about this, and really teaching on it, especially when someone like myself, so I had multiple H. pylori infections. I had them as a child. Nobody knew. Finally got tested around 17, 18 years old. They found that I had the H. pylori infection. Again, it came back. This is because I was on PPIs. Believe me, the only reason I know any of this is because I've been through it all. Like, I've been through some pretty dark times and had all of these things and just couldn't figure out what was wrong with my body. Well, there was so much wrong with it. And really, the stomach and the digestive tract has to be fixed first. So what I did was, again, I was on multiple courses of antibiotics. I was on the PPIs. I was on all these different things. And then I found the research looking back into Ayurvedic and looking back into really some Native American-based herbal treatments. And I saw that mastic gum was one of those things. And then I came along a formulation I could create called Healthy Belly. And that, to this day, it's just remarkable. Again, it's not an expensive product. You certainly don't have to use it. You can simply look at the ingredients. And if you want to try to mix and match your own, you're obviously welcome to do that. But that is something that really keeps the bacteria in the gut at check. You could certainly use it once a year if you wanted to, twice a year. But really, if you feel like that abdominal bloating, if you feel a lot of the symptoms that I talked about before, it might be a place to start. It might be a thing to try out, and you might just get remarkable benefits just from really removing a lot of that bacteria from the gut. So again, you could do the Healthy Belly, and then you could do an intestinal cleanse after about a week or two of using the Healthy Belly. I would use the Healthy Belly for 1 month, 1 capsule in the morning, upon waking, 1 before bed. If that makes you nauseous because of die-off or because of the zinc in there, then simply take it with breakfast and dinner, 1 capsule each, and that would work great. So hopefully this helps. I just want to share with you, really what I do in my own life, what I do with my family, what I do in my practice. And so really, I love this saying that it's like kind of like each one teach one. I'm teaching it to you. It was taught to me, whether that was through books or mentors or just my own kind of study, kind of just taking in all the different forms of medicine. But once you learn it, then let's say one of your friends or one of your friends' kids gets food poisoning. Why not just share this information then with them so that their child gets better, but they do it naturally. So they didn't have to go on the drugs. They didn't have to go on all of these different things that can then lead to longer repercussions just from the drug in the first place. Meaning, like, the infection is one thing, the bacterial infection is one thing, that's bad enough. But then you take the drugs and the drugs create another issue, which then means you need another drug. And it's this vicious cycle, and that goes on and on. So I'm going to keep it there for today. Really do appreciate your listens. And please let me know if there are any follow-up questions on this. I'd be happy to help. Take care. Before you go, I wanted to ask you this question. What if I could teach you in just a couple of hours how to transform your thyroid, hormones, adrenal, cholesterol, blood pressure, blood sugar, weight loss, energy, mood, brain, pregnancy, anti-aging, or many other health-related issues? After 20 years in private practice, after seeing and overseeing 250,000 client appointments, I sincerely feel I have the real-world data and have found the answer you've been searching for. So what I've done is spent hundreds of hours of my own time refining what you need to know in order to uncover your underlying root cause health issues and then begin to rebalance the body and bring it back to a state of robust health and wellness. I'm going to teach you exactly what I do in my private practice so you can understand how you got here and now what you need to do in order to heal. You'll receive all of the important success checklists, protocols, and even ways to customize it to make the program fit your busy life. And you'll get all of this at a fraction of the price. Let me save you the time, money, energy, stress, and frustration of not knowing what to do next. Instead of reading dozens of books on the topic and seeing multiple practitioners, I will condense everything that you need to know in just a few hours of video tutorials that you can watch and listen to anywhere. Together, we will make this healing process an enjoyable one that you can take with you for the rest of your life. I wish you all of the best of health and happiness, and I hope to be able to guide you on your healing journey through my Health Results Accelerators. Simply choose the health imbalance you're currently suffering from, and by the end of today, you'll know what went wrong and how to get well again. I guarantee it. For details, head over now to stephencabral.com/courses.